I am Piyush and I'm going to be your co-host today. And I have Sunita with me, who is going to be our main host. Sunita has over 13 years of experience of mentoring students for verbal section of various entrance tests. She is a verbal whiz, to be honest, and she really excels at simplifying even the most complex aspects of GMAT verbal. So she is going to be the main host who is going to take you through the main part of the webinar about sentence correction. And as I told you, I am Piyush and I'm going to be a co-host. I have approximately 8 years of experience of mentoring students prepare for various management entrance tests. I have written the GMAT myself and scored a 740. And I'm going to be the main host for the next webinar, for which the link is shared in the chat. Okay, so that I like dealing with numbers. I love analyzing data, and I love helping students with the right test taking strategies. So at any point of time, if you want to connect with me, you can always reach out to me directly by writing at piyush@gmatwiz.com. So let me tell you what is the webinar, how is the webinar structured. So we're going to have 3 sections in this webinar. In the first section, we are very quickly going to run you through who we are as a company. So we are going to take 5 minutes to do that. Then for the main part of this webinar, which is approximately an hour and a half to 100 minutes roughly, we will be focusing on sentence correction. We will be taking up some important concepts in sentence correction and help you learn how to apply the strategy, the meaning-based approach that we're going to talk about at length in all those concepts. Okay, and that is where Sunita will come into picture. And then we will open the webinar for an open-ended Q&A, where we are going to spend around 15 minutes answering your questions. It could be around sentence correction, it could be around verbal strategy, it could be around your GMAT study plan as well. And a new thing has come up. GMAT has came up with a online version. I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about it. In case you have any questions regarding that too, we are more than happy to take it up in the Q&A part. Okay, so this is how the webinar is structured. So let me take you through who we are. Okay, so we are a group of experts who have decades of experience of interacting with students through multiple top institutes across the globe. And when we were interacting with the students, we actually had a first-hand experience of some of the biggest pain points that the students face. Okay, what we saw was even the topmost institutes who focus a lot on the delivering the right content do not really equip students with the right study plans. The students are left to plan their studies themselves. They're left to analyze their strengths and weaknesses themselves, and they do not get individual attention. And because of which, what happens is even a good number of students who could do well on the test are not able to do well. So only students who are from the top league schools or who are very, very brilliant, who would have done good anyway, actually end up doing well, and the average students are not able to improve that fast. Okay, so what we realized was these are some of the main pain points that students go through, and even solutions which are there in the industry today who try to solve this problem only solve the problem partially. For example, you might have heard some institutes giving you a study plan, which is a 1-month study plan or a 3-month study plan. But the problem with the study plans is this is a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, they are static plans which do not adapt, do not change in real time as you learn. They do not change based on your strengths or weaknesses. They do not change based on the time which is available with you. So in the end, even if you get a study plan, it is going to stay with you for the first 7 or 10 days. You're going to be really excited with it, but later on, when it doesn't adapt and you fall behind the schedule, it really doesn't work for you. You forget even about the study plan altogether. Okay, so Harleen, I'm going to write about the website URL. I'm going to share it in the chat here. You can check it out over here. So this is one thing which we found. Then what we saw was, even regarding your strengths and weaknesses, some institutes do provide you statistics. They share that, okay, probably in SC, this is your accuracy. Probably in modifiers, you are not doing well. But why are you not doing well is something very few people tell you. The insights that are given to you are not really actionable. And what we thought as a group of tutors was that if you use technology in the right way, even every option that a student marks has a reason for marking, right? If option B is correct and option C, D, E, or A are incorrect, there are definite reasons why they are incorrect. So if someone is marking option D instead of option B, there is a reason. There is a flaw in his or her understanding. So if we use data in the right way, if you collect data in the right way, you can definitely generate insights which are much more actionable than just telling them, okay, you are not good in SC. You need to tell them why are you not good in SC. And what we saw was that basically there's no way to get individual attention. The only way to get individual attention is to basically go for private tutoring, which is not really affordable for most of the people. Okay, and this is how basically this is when we thought of the idea of GMATwhiz. The idea of GMATwhiz came into our mind, and we thought that we should be creating a course which is world's only truly personalized course, and that's when GMATwhiz came into picture. Okay, so what GMATwhiz does is it helps students who actually study with us with a personalized study plan based on their strengths, weaknesses, time available, and everything. And then we top it up with real-time improvement modules. So if you're not good at something, if you're weak at something, you don't have to wait till the end to understand you're weak. The system uses artificial intelligence to point out your gaps in understanding right then and there. So you move to the advanced topics only after doing well on the basic topics. So this is the only course which gives you real-time improvement modules. And then we top it up with dedicated mentorship. Every student who is there, who takes up the complete package, which is the complete GMAT prep package or any of our private tutoring packages, gets a personal mentor who has been in the industry for 8+ years, who has given the GMAT himself and has scored more than 700. So you get a mentor who will look at your progress every 10 to 15 days and help you course correct if something doesn't go as planned. Okay, so for gone are the days when you have prepared for 3 or 4 months for the GMAT and later you realize that you are stuck at a 650. We are there to help you out to ensure that you are always on track. Okay, and these three things are one of the biggest reasons that our students have actually improved their score substantially. In fact, we are very proud to say that we are GMAT Club's most effective course in terms of average score improvement. And this is data based on verified reviews on GMAT Club website. So if you look at the average improvement of our students, we have been able to generate an average improvement of 110 points, 116 points on an average, whereas top institutes, you can see Veritas has a 99 points average improvement, Magoosh 73, GMAT 71, and TAC Verbal has just 66 points average score improvement. That just goes to say that how much we really care about our students and what are the solutions that we're offering and how it is changing the student's life. Okay, so this is all about us. I just wanted to give you a brief intro on that front. So let me hand over the webinar now to Sunita to take you through the second part of the webinar, which is the main part where we're going to talk about sentence correction. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So it will take 1 minute for Sunita to come live and share her screen. So ma'am, you can join now. You can start sharing your screen.
All right. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction about us. And I'm sure the students, as we proceed down the session, will begin to see what you were talking about. So just give me a moment, guys. Let me just share the screen with you. Okay, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are. Hope all of you are keeping yourselves safe and healthy. Crisis times this, but then this is the time to catch up on your preparation. All right. So most people approach SC with a lot of fear, and the fear makes them use different kinds of approaches. So let me begin this webinar by asking you guys, what do you think is the most important requirement for solving GMAT SC questions? Huh? You can answer me in the chat. What, according to you, is the most important requirement for solving GMAT SC questions? Just give me short answers. You can reply to me in the chat boxes, guys. Okay. So what, according to you, is the most important requirement as a student for solving GMAT SC questions? And in a moment, you'll begin to see why this is a very important question to ask. So each of you needs to introspect and think what you really believe is very important, because what you believe is what you would probably being using. All right, you'll be using it more and more. So let me know what you think is the most important requirement for solving SC GMAT questions. Come on, guys. I want you to interact with me, open up to me, tell me about your
Ma'am, I
problem.
think there are a
Uh,
lot of responses already in the chat.
I can't see. I see. Oh, there is a snitch. Okay, okay. I think I can see now. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you. Okay, so Ira says grammar rules. Sarthak says logic and grammar. Structure and grammar says Dingani. Knowing the right technique says Antonia. Well, Antonia, that's a very mysterious, enigmatic answer. Knowing the right technique, because each of us would have our own right techniques, right? Muhammad says meaning. Anand says meaning. Tumursuk says logic, grammar, so subject verb agreement, understanding the meaning, um, point of entry, logic, meaning. So a lot of you agree with me, agree with each other that it is the meaning and the logic which is important. And then you also say that it is the grammar which is important. Okay, so let me bring up a poll. Okay, let me bring up a poll here. Mm, you can see here on your screens. Just give me a moment. So on your screens, you will see these three options, okay? These three options resonate mostly with what you guys have been putting in. So I'll bring up a poll, just a minute. And I want you guys to tell me which of these three is most important for you. And hold on a sec. I will just put on the, yeah. Okay, here's the poll. All right. Okay. So I want you guys to choose the one which you believe is most important for solving GMAT SC questions. And this is important. In a moment, I'm going to establish or make my point. Just bear with me till then. We are going to have a lot of fun in this 2-hour session. And I promise you, your way of thinking, your way of looking at SC will change completely after the seminar. So bear with me. Trust me on that promise. Let's see what your poll says. So I'm going to end the poll. All right. All right. This is interesting. So 14% of you, okay, believe that having proper knowledge of the rules to be applied is most important. Then there's 17% of you who believes that being able to recognize the patterns in the questions and answer choices is the most important. And then there is a hefty chunk of you, 68% of you, who believe being able to understand the meaning of the original sentence is very important. So 70%, nearly 70% of you believe meaning is important, okay? Meaning of the original sentence. Now let me ask you another question, guys, and you'll begin to see why why I'm asking these questions. So that was one answer. Okay, now here's another question for you. How do you allocate your time, guys? And let me again bring up the poll for you.
Let me help you with the polls. So just
That'll
get the
be
polls.
great, Piyush.
Yeah, sure.
So yes, guys, how do you allocate your time, given that you have different beliefs about what is most important in solving SC questions? Where do you give your maximum time? Do you give almost equal time to all the choices? Do you give most of the time to choice A, which is the original choice, and then you give the remaining time, you distribute the remaining time to the other choices? Or is it that you eliminate some of the choices and then, let's say if you're left with two choices, you give the maximum time to those two choices? Let's see. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds and then I'm going to end the poll, guys. All right, so I'm going to end the poll, and if you haven't put in your answers, quickly put them through. All right. Okay. Now, here's the very interesting thing. Remember how nearly 70% of you agreed that understanding the intended meaning of the original sentence was most important in order to solve GMAT SC questions. Okay, this is what 70% of you agreed on. Now, if you look at the results of this poll, what are the results? 13% of you give almost equal time to all choices. 15% of you give, only 15% of you give most of the time to choice A. And 70% of you actually eliminate the choices and give the remaining time to the other choices. So that means those of you, now what does this mean actually? What it means is very simple, guys. It means is, meaning is important. which is why 70% of you said that understanding the intended meaning is important, but you don't know how to implement the meaning based approach, which is why 70% of you give most of the time to eliminating the choices. Okay, only 15% of you actually give time to understanding the original sentence, that is choice A. And I hope you can understand what this means. What this means is you're very confused as to how to apply the meaning based approach. You are right, meaning is very, very important as far as GMAT SC goes, but then as Antonia was saying earlier, we need to know the right approach. You just I mean, this is not to tell that you guys are not preparing or you guys are not having your own right techniques, but the point is you don't really know how to use this, how to best best utilize this meaning thing. You don't know how to implement the meaning based approach. And this entire session, this entire session is dedicated to teaching you that meaning based approach. In the entire session, we will be applying this meaning based approach. We will be telling you all about it. We will be dissecting, bisecting, completely, demystifying this approach for you. All right. Okay, so hold on tight to your seats, guys, and give me all your attention. I promise you there are going to be some real eye openers here for most of you. Okay, so what I will do is I'll start with a very simple sentence. Okay, and for those of you, in fact, for all of you who've been preparing for a GMAT, even if it is for less than a month, you might think that this is a very simple sentence. The point of this sentence is to establish a very simple point, and I'll make that point. But for now, just hold on to the fact that this sentence is not representative of GMAT-like questions. The purpose of the sentence is to help you understand this meaning-based approach. So here comes the sentence. Okay. Now, I want you guys to read the sentence. Okay. I want all of you to read the sentence. And if you believe it is incorrect, provide me in the chat, provide me what should be the correction. If you believe it is incorrect. And if you believe it is correct, simply say correct. I want your answers in the chat, guys. Quickly. Look at the sentence. And, the blue part is the underlined part. Okay. So I want you to tell me whether the sentence is correct as is. And if there is something wrong with the sentence, if it is incorrect, I want you to give me the corrected portion in the chat boxes. So let's see. I'm waiting for your responses. Let me. It's a simple sentence. Don't think that, I mean, you might get this kind of sentence on GMAT as well, but then right now I'm trying to make, okay. So I'm starting to get some answers here. Sukhjinder says she has. Ria says despite. Aratrika says it's incorrect. Despite having, Chirag says she has, although she has. Antonia, yes, it's incorrect. The verb is missing. Very good. Adonis says verb is missing. Although she has, she is having. Okay, she has. In spite. Although she is having. Although she had. Although she has should be correct. So most of you agree that the sentence as is incorrect. Okay. Most of you. Good. Now, I'm going to bring up something very interesting. Definitely the sentence is incorrect, and as we can see, there are various ways of correcting the sentence. Okay. Let's see what would be the correct, the correct choice on this question. So let me bring up the answer choices, and here are the answer choices. And now, Piyush, I would like you to bring up the poll for this. Piyush will bring up the poll in a moment, and then you can tell me, because you guys have gone through the sentence without the option of looking at the answer choices, which means you have given some time to the original sentence and you have come up with various options. Now, let's see. So all of you agree it should be C. All right. Okay, I'm waiting. I can see some of you are changing your answer choices. Let's give you another 10 seconds, guys. And let's see what you have got after that. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. I know that's quick counting. 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to end the poll here. All right. Okay. So the poll results were like almost 80% of you were with choice C, and some of you believe that choice D was correct. Okay, let's see. Now, the point that I was trying to make, and I'm going to prove it in a moment. If I look at the answer choices here, all right, each of you must have gone through the sentence in your own way and would have come up with rectifying the correct answer. All right. So I'm going to give you how I would have solved this. All right. So Melissa makes sure. So we're talking about somebody called Melissa. All right. She makes sure of something. Let's see what she makes sure of. She gives ample time to her two school-going children. So that's what she ensures, that her two school-going children get ample time before she leaves as well as after she gets home from work. All right. Although she having. So although here is a word which brings about a contrast, okay? A contrast in the ideas. So Melissa makes sure she gives enough time to her children, although she having. Now, as most of you correctly pointed out, having here is not a verb, okay? It's a word which looks like a verb, as in it has an ing to it, but it doesn't have a helping verb, and therefore it is not a verb. If it is not a verb, then we don't have a subject verb pair, and therefore she having is incorrect. And most of you said that it should be although she has. Okay. Now the question that arises is, if it is although she has, then what is wrong with options like since she has, all right, and she has, because there we have verbs. I'll get to that in a moment. So the crux of this sentence is, Melissa makes sure she gives time to her children, and she does this despite having a very hectic schedule throughout the day, although she has a very hectic schedule throughout the day. So this flavor of contrast is there in the original sentence. The intended meaning is to bring about this contrast, and when we choose the correct answer choice, it should have this flavor as well, this flavor of the contrast. Now let's look at the first choice. So this we have already identified that this is incorrect. We can divide the sentence into two parts and read it. Melissa makes sure, and although she is having, although we've all discussed that it imparts a taste of contrast. Okay, so this is what we analyzed about choice A, and choice A was incorrect. Let's now look at choice B. The whole purpose of giving so much of time to choice A was you would have an idea about the intended meaning, most important. Okay, the intended meaning here is to bring about the contrast in what Melissa does and what Melissa faces in the at work. Okay, and that is to be kept in mind. The other thing that is to be kept in mind is we should have a subject verb pair. All right, if there is the usage is same of although. So let's look at choice B, since she has. All right. Now, what does this sentence convey? Melissa makes sure she gives ample time to her children since she has a hectic day at work. Now, choice B here implies that she gives time to her children. Melissa gives time to her children because she has a busy day at work. The relationship here is not that of a contrast, but of a cause and effect. Okay, although that cause and effect is not even logical. Why would she, I mean, because she has a hectic schedule, that is why she gives ample time to her children, is a little illogical. And more than that, there is a wrong flavor coming out here, which was very, very different from the intended meaning, and therefore it is incorrect. None of you chose this, which is fine to say, but you should know the right reason why you have eliminated choice B. So if most of you have eliminated choice B because of this, you are bang on target. If you have eliminated it because you were just confused and you found choice C more appealing, then that is not the right reason, because for more difficult questions, this will actually cause a lot of confusion, this lack of clarity about the meaning of the original sentence. Let's move to choice C. Choice C correctly brings out the flavor of the contrast, and a lot of you had suggested that despite or in spite of could be used to bring out the rectify the sentence. So those of you who did that, correct, and choice C is the correct choice, no doubt about that. All right. the interesting thing is, what's wrong with choice D? I mean, what is the reason choice D is not correct? Is it grammatically incorrect? I'm sure most of you would agree with me when I say no, choice D is not grammatically incorrect. Okay. I mean, look at it this way. Melissa makes sure she gives ample time to her two school going children, and she has a hectic schedule throughout the day at work. Okay. Nothing wrong with it, except that the contrast, that flavor of contrast, the intended meaning is not brought out here. It's like presenting two separate pieces of information which have got nothing to do with each other. All right. And that is why choice D is incorrect. Okay. Choice D is incorrect because it conveys a very different meaning. It does not offer the sense of contrast. It simply puts side by side two separate, let's say, pieces of information. Okay. So those of you who mark choice D, and if I recall correctly, about 15-20% of you did mark choice D, please understand the issue here is meaning. Remember, that's where we started, the meaning based, the intended meaning. So if you have given ample time to the original sentence, you would know that the intended meaning is to show a contrast between what Melissa does and what Melissa faces at work. Okay. Choice D doesn't bring out that contrast. And GMAT is full of such tricks, guys. Okay. So this is the point that I was trying to make. Original sentence is very important. Only 15% of you said that you would give the maximum time to the original sentence. And that has got to change, guys. If you really want to up your score, if you really want to improve your accuracy, if you really want to improve your confidence in solving the SC questions, the first thing that you need to do is to um, give ample time to the original sentence. And the second thing that you do is to understand the intended meaning. Okay. And we will look at that in detail. Now, if we look at choice E, where she has, I would say this sentence is also grammatically correct. Nothing wrong with this, okay? Except that it again does not show any contrast. We are simply saying that Melissa gives time to her children after she gets home from work. Where, so the where would be referring to the place, that is the place of work, where she has a hectic schedule throughout the day. So nothing wrong with this, but definitely not per the intended meaning. Okay. So this simple example establishes one simple fact. Okay. The fact is that logic is important when we are looking at the correct answer choice. All right. Logic is very important. A lot of you agreed on that, but understand what you meant by saying logic is important. The intended meaning is very important. Okay. You may have a grammatically correct sentence, but something which conveys a very different meaning from the original sentence's intended meaning, then that's not the correct choice. Okay. Last but not the least, the sentence should be concise. Okay. GMAT does not favor roundabout ways, long wordy sentences. Okay, does not. Although very rarely conciseness is seen as a deterministic error, nonetheless, it is important to keep in mind that your correct choice should also be concise in meaning. Okay, so these are the most important things that you are going to look at when you're looking at the meaning based approach. So keep that in mind. Now I'm going to grade up a bit. I'm going to introduce you to an official question, 700 plus level question, and we are going to apply the same meaning based approach to that question. All right. So just before that, I would like to hear from you in the chat. Have you guys understood what this meaning based approach is all about? Kritagya is asking a very important question. Ma'am, if we use where she has, do we have to apply comma after verb? Now, Kritagya, I've just explained that where she has, for one, is very different from the intended meaning that the sentence wanted to convey. So that is why it is not correct. All right. And when, as far as it comes to commas, GMAT doesn't go too heavy on commas unless and until it impedes or impacts the meaning of the sentence. So here a comma is not really required. All right. Okay, Galib, you wanted me to recap these 3 steps. The point, we were not really talking about steps here. We were talking about the 3 most important things that a meaning-based approach looks for. The choices should be logical. The correct choice should be per the intended meaning of the original sentence, and the correct choice should be concise in meaning. All right. So that is what. Now I'm going to talk about the steps involved in the meaning-based approach. So hold on to that. All right. Sarthak, yes, more illustration is coming up. So here comes the next. Here is the official question. I'm going to give you exactly 2 minutes. Although this is, I mean, the whole point of this exercise is to show you how to apply the intended meaning. So I'll give you about 2.5 minutes, not more than that. All right. And we'll bring up the poll in a moment. All the best, guys. Give this your best shot, and then we will discuss about the steps that are required to be followed while following the intended meaning approach. Okay. So here comes the poll. Okay, guys, I am going to end the poll. So let me quickly count 5 for those of you who are ready with your answers but haven't put in the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to end the poll here. Okay, so 3%, so there's 1% of you who goes with choice A, 3% who goes with choice B, 17% of you go with choice C. D is the most popular choice of the evening with 63% of you going with it, and 13% of you go with choice E. All right, let me quickly begin with my, meaning-based approach. So when we are looking at the meaning-based approach, the first thing that we do is to read the original sentence carefully. Okay, break the sentence into small parts. Okay, understand the meaning of that small part and proceed to the next part. All right, so in we have dedicated a complete unit to how to do this. Let me show you that. Okay, that educators have not anticipated. Now here we are beginning with a that. All right, so that is when we begin a sentence like this with that, it is usually used to refer to the subject, which is a clause, an upcoming the upcoming subject, which is a clause. It is like saying the fact that. All right, it is like saying the fact that. So let's see, the fact that educators have not anticipated So we are talking about a fact, and the fact is that the educators have not anticipated, they have not expected the impact of microcomputer technology. Okay, so the fact that we are talking about is educators have not anticipated the kind of impact microcomputer technology has had. All right, so this is a fact, can hardly be said. All right, now this that as the big at the beginning, all right, is clearly referring to the educators have not expected microcomputer technology to have the kind of impact it has had. Okay, now what does this can hardly be said that is doing? All right, that some people have not anticipated something. Now this second that is clearly redundant. Okay, second that, so that this fact can hardly be said that, I'll repeat, that this fact can hardly be said that. So these two that's don't make sense at all. Okay, they don't make sense at all. It's not clear why the second that is being used. It would have been better to say that educators have not done something can hardly be said to be. Can hardly be said that is therefore definitely incorrect. Redundant, as I said earlier, conciseness, logic, all these things have to be looked into. So by dividing this sentence into small parts, you can see clearly that the two that's are redundant here. All right, let us read further. It is their fault. Now, when we read this segment, what we are saying is it can hardly be said that it is their fault. So the fact that something can hardly be said that it is their fault. Now, what is this it? What is this it referring to? What is this it referring to, guys? I want you guys to give me your answers in the chat box. What is this it referring to? Remember, it is a pronoun and it must refer to a noun, right? So what is this it referring to? Let me have your answers. What is this it referring to? That educators have not anticipated something can hardly be said that it is their fault. What is it referring to? Ashish says failure. Nishal says not anticipating. Okay, Nishal, that is interesting. That they haven't realized, says Shivangi. Uh, the impact. Now, the point here is it, therefore, a lot of you are not clear about what this it is referring to. Okay. Sarthak says not anticipating. Now, not anticipated, have not anticipated is a verb. Can it logically refer to have not anticipated? Have not anticipated is a verb. So let me come to that. All right. A lot of you are saying that it is referring to not anticipated. A lot of you are saying that it refers to the impact. Okay. Adonis has very nicely put it. It erroneously refers to the action educators have not anticipated. Good. It does seem to refer to the have not anticipated portion. So I'll now, having cottoned on to that, guys, okay, so if you are questioning yourself that what is this it referring to, then you're on the right track. If you're questioning what is this second that referring to, you're on the right track. So this is the way you need to break your sentences and read it. You need to try to keep identifying what the meaning of the sentence is, how it evolves. So far we have it that the educators, the fact that educators have not anticipated can hardly be said that it is their fault. Probably what they're trying to say here is the fact that they have not anticipated is not their fault. All right. So the it has no antecedent here. Okay. As you guys said, it is not their fault is referring to the fact that they have not anticipated. Have not anticipated is a verb. It cannot refer to a verb. A pronoun cannot refer to a verb. All right. A lot of you said that the impact. Now, is the impact their fault? Ask logically. Is the impact their fault? Is the microcomputer technology their fault? No, no, and definitely we can't refer to the educators as it. So the it can logically only refer to the verb there. Okay, and we know that it, grammatically speaking, it cannot refer to a verb, and that is the error there. So you can see how by dividing the sentence into small pieces, you are able to, one, identify the errors which you would otherwise probably miss out on. Okay. Two, you're able to understand the intended meaning, so that when you come across a choice which is grammatically correct but does not convey the intended meaning, you know immediately that is not the correct choice. So a lot of things are working for you when you are following this approach. All right. In our modules, we have dedicated a complete unit to teaching you the skill of reading the sentence, breaking the sentence at the right places. All right, we will tell students where to break the sentences. Okay, the entire drill. So this entire skill of reading the original sentence to identify the errors and to identify the intended meaning is something that we really um, uh, we really teach our students in our entire model. In fact, all the questions on our let's say on our interface, all the questions in our question banks, all the questions that we have solved in our course is solved by using this method, okay, the meaning based approach. And that is why we are so very different from any other prep course, right? So all in all, what we are trying to say here, therefore, if we look at the intended meaning, all right, I haven't completed the ununderlined portion, right? Let me just complete that. So that educators have not anticipated the impact is not their fault. All right. Alvin Toffler, one of the most prominent students of the future. So here we have another sentence separated by a colon there. We're talking about Alvin Toffler. He is one of the most prominent students of the future. What did he do? He did not even mention microcomputers in Future Shock, published in 1970. So this sentence is probably being given to show that if Alvin Toffler, who is a very prominent student of the future, did not mention microcomputers in Future Shock, then you cannot really blame the educators for not having anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology. So all in all, the intended meaning that comes across is the educators can hardly be said to be at fault for not having anticipated something, and they have not anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology. And despite being one of the most prominent students of the future, Toffler had not even mentioned microcomputers, and therefore, when such a prominent personality had not mentioned anything about the microcomputers, you can't really expect the educators to have anticipated something like that, right? Now, I want you guys to just answer me a yes or no, okay? Are you wondering that we do not, the way Sunita has solved the original sentence, the way Sunita has approached the original sentence is very different from the way we approach the original sentence? If you are wondering that, just answer me a yes, okay? Are you wondering that the way you solve the original sentence, the way you approach the original
Let me
sentence is
bring
very
up a
different?
poll, ma'am, for this. So
Okay,
there
yeah,
is a
that would be
poll
great.
actually. Huh? Get to it in the poll.
So let's see, and I want you guys to be honest about it. There's that honesty will actually help you. All right. Um, so let's see how many of you. Okay, 100% of you have found the approach very different. Um, uh, um, Piyush, if you can bring up another poll. So, if almost 100% of you have found the approach very different, how many of you all agree that this approach works better than your approach? So, for those of you uh, who use a very different approach, how many of you will find or found that this approach really works? Cool. So almost every one of you believes that this approach really works. Now, trust me, I'll bring up some very interesting questions in a moment. All right. Some related to verbs and some related to modifiers, where you will find that this approach actually, you'll really get the feel of the approach working. Okay, this was an official question. It is quite possible a lot of you already knew the answer or already had seen it, so maybe you didn't get that impact of something really working for you, but I promise you. So thank you very much for that interaction, guys, that you have really found this approach that works for you. All right. So
And
what we are going
one
to do.
more thing, ma'am. There are a lot of people who are asking about was like they're confused about the uses of it still. So I'm just going to give you a very simple thought process here. Ask yourself the question: what is that? It is referring to? What is their fault? If you replace it with what is, okay, what is their fault? What is the fault? Can we say microcomputer technology is the fault? It is not the fault. Can we say impact is the fault? Definitely that's not the fault. Can we say the educators is the fault? We can definitely not say that it is the fault. The fault is the action of not be anticipating the impact. Okay, that is the fault. So logically, if you see the pronoun, it is referring to a action, a verb. Okay, but grammatically it is not allowed to do so. All right. So I hope now a good number of you asked this question in the poll here, so like chat here, so you should be clear with it. Now, one more thing which I will give you as a tip. Again, I'm sorry for interfering here, ma'am, but just one tip which I'm giving here.
No,
That
no, please do
yeah,
continue.
this is something I used to do as a student, so I can understand why students are doing this. So when you see a pronoun, don't try to fit it with every other noun that is there. Okay, try to ask yourself a question: what is this pronoun logically referring to? Like, if you focus on the logic part, if you focus on this part, that okay, what is their fault, you don't have to actually plug it with every single noun which is there, because that's like a very tedious task. Imagine if you had 10 different nouns in the previous part of it, earlier part of the sentence. Will you try plugging every of each of those 10 nouns in place of it? Doesn't make sense. Instead, if you simply ask simple question, what is their fault, the answer is not the action of not having anticipated the impact. So that's an action. It cannot refer to an action. Pronoun cannot refer to an action. So that's my take on it. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you so much for that clarity. I actually didn't see those things on the chat, so I was so busy talking. I'm so sorry, guys. All right. Let's now move to the answer choice elimination. So let's quickly recap. First, we approach the original sentence with full attention. Okay, we read the entire sentence by dividing it into small parts. We understand the meaning. We lock on to where the meaning is not logical, where it is not conveying anything sensible or meaningful, and we continue like that. In the process, we keep identifying what works grammatically and what does not work. But at the end of the day, we are supposed to identify the intended meaning. So that's the first step, analysis of the original sentence. And that is where your maximum time should go, guys. To answer the question of the first poll that I put up, the maximum time should always be given to the original sentence. Thereafter, you derive the intended meaning as we have done and as it is there on the screen. The next step is you look at the choices, okay, one by one. You can quickly look at the split and see where the error that you have identified in choice A exists in other sentences, and then you can eliminate those sentences and concentrate on the sentences which are different. So here, since each of the sentences is different, let us quickly go through them. All right. So choice A, if you look at, we've already eliminated this. Choice B, that educators have not anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology, okay, can hardly be said to be at fault. Now, if we look at this, can hardly be said to be at fault. Who is at fault? Does this choice tell us who is at fault? That educators have not anticipated something can hardly be said to be at fault. It seems that we are saying that whatever has happened can hardly be said to be at fault. So the verb can hardly be said to be at fault. And that is illogical. The verb can hardly be said to be at fault makes no sense. All right. The sentence could have been corrected by saying that the educators have not anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology can hardly be said to be their fault. All right. So it is not the fault of the educators that they have not anticipated the impact of the microcomputer technology. All right, and that makes this choice incorrect. So very few of you chose choice B, and I hope you can see where you went wrong. All right, here in this sentence we don't know who can hardly be said to be at fault. All right, it seems the entire clause can hardly be said to be at fault, and that is pretty illogical. Let's go to choice C. Choice C says uh, it can hardly be said that, okay, it can hardly be said that it is the fault of educators. Okay, so we cannot say that it is the fault of the educators. Who are these educators? These educators are people who have not anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology. So the portion after who is a modifier. Okay, if I look at this choice, who have not anticipated the impact of microcomputer technology is a modifier which is telling us about something about the educators. All right, so the sentence in a sense reads that it can hardly be said that it is the fault of certain kind of educators, and these certain kind of educators are educators who have not anticipated something. But what is the fault of these educators? Does this choice actually tell us what is the fault? Because the modifier does not contain the main verb, does not contain the fault. The modifier is like giving you some general information about the educators. In fact, if I replace the contents of the modifier, if I say it can hardly be said that it is the fault of educators who do not believe in xyz, even then you won't know what this fault is, right? So this modifier is actually not telling me the fault of the educators. It is giving me some extra information about the educators. So the intended meaning wanted was to tell me that it is not the fault of educators that they have not anticipated the impact, and this choice does not tell me that fault. Okay, so therefore, because of that, the focus in this entire sentence shifts from the fault to the educators. Okay, and therefore this choice is logically and grammatically correct. There's nothing wrong with this sentence. It can hardly be said that it is the fault of educators in certain type of educators. There's nothing wrong grammatically, but it conveys a very different meaning, right? It does not convey the intended meaning, as you can see, and this choice is incorrect therefore. So for those of you who chose choice C, there was, I think, 17% of you chose choice C. I hope you can see why it is not the correct choice. By now, I think all of you can see why this choice is not correct. So let's quickly move to choice D. We have some really good questions coming up, so I'm not going to delay this one anymore. I think by now Piyush has really clarified things very, very well for us. D is the correct choice. All right. It can hardly be said that educators are at fault. At fault for doing what? For not anticipating the impact of microcomputer technology. So that entire concept of it has been removed from here. Directly, we are saying that it is not the fault of the educators for not anticipating something, right? That's that. Great work, guys. Those of you have chosen choice D. If you have eliminated the other choices for the right reasons, very good. That's important. Choice E, let's look at this. Choice E says the fact that educators are at fault. Okay, so the fact, what is that fact? The educators are at fault. Fault for what? For not anticipating the impact of microcomputer technology can hardly be said. So what can hardly be said? The fact can hardly be said. This construction means, therefore, that the fact cannot be said. So a fact is not a fact, which is very, very illogical. Okay, a fact cannot be said is illogical, and therefore, this choice, is not correct. All right. So a lot of you had also chosen choice C, and I hope you can see why choice E is not correct. All right. Choice E kind of says the fact can hardly be said. All right. So we're not talking. The focus is not about the educators being at fault for not having anticipated something. All right. So the crux of this now is therefore very simple. Very simple, and pay attention to this. The main goal of language is to communicate clear and logical meaning, and that is what GMAT SC questions are testing. Okay, whether you can understand that the sentence is communicating clear and logical meaning or not. All right, and for that there is a standardization of language. Okay, communication requires standardization of language. All right, what you want to say and what you want me to understand should be conveyed through a standard problem. All right, and therefore you were not given any grammar book to use and start speaking. Grammar is something that you understand that okay, if I'm conveying something logical, then it is grammatically correct, so to speak. Also, the good part here is that 80 to 90% of the SC questions on GMAT are focused on the meaning, and grammar rules also focus on meaning, except the idioms. In fact, idioms also are standardization of language. So the good part is, because GMAT SC questions focus on meaning, and in fact grammar rules are also supposed to focus on meaning, it is the meaning based approach that you need to follow. Okay, so what we'll do now is, uh, you know without delving into the details of any topic, because we cannot really teach any topic on this platform, I'll take one topic at a time and show you how meaning based approach can be used to solve questions related to that topic. Okay, some of the most troublesome topics are the perfect tenses. Okay, I'm sure you will agree with me that most of the times that you're troubled by tenses is when you're looking at the perfect tenses. And then the other part that troubles you is the modifiers in comparison. So I'll bring up one question of each topic, and we will apply the meaning based approach. And I promise you, in each of the questions there will be some really important takeaway for you, all right, which you can remember for the rest of your life and apply it. So are you ready, guys? Are you ready for some very interesting revelations? Yes, let me see your yeses so that I can get kind of charged up. Yes, guys? Are you ready for some really, you know, epiphanic moments? I'm recharging myself, waiting for your yeses to recharge myself. Yes, are you excited? Are you excited? If you are excited, let me see this. The yeses.
I think all of them are excited, ma'am.
Oh,
We see
yes.
a lot of
See
polls.
some. Yeah,
Everyone
I
here
just.
is saying 100%. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I didn't see the polls again as usual. So uh, let's start with the uh, let's say, feared. Okay, I'm sure many of you often wonder, why do we need this past perfect tense? Why is this past perfect tense needed at all? We have the past, there's the simple past tense. So why not just use that and be done with that? So the past perfect tense is required. Now this is important, so listen carefully. The past perfect tense is required when there are two events that took place in the past, all right? There are two events that took place in the past, but not at the same time. So let's say we have event 1 and event 2, and these two events took place in the past, but not at the same time. Now, because they did not take place at the same time, there is a certain sequence in which they took place. Therefore, there is a need to clarify the sequence of these two events. All right. And in order to show which one took place first and which one took place second or next, we need the past perfect tense. I'll come to that back in a moment. There is a very important thing to remember here. This need arises only when there is a requirement for clarifying the sequence. Sometimes the context clears the sequence for you. The context itself tells you which event took place first and which event took place afterwards. And in such a case, there is no need to clarify the sequence. Then, if you use the past perfect tense, GMAT considers it incorrect. Now, if that leaves you even more baffled, let me make it simpler for you. Let's look at these two sentences, guys. Okay, Piyush, you can get ready. I don't know if we'll need a poll here. So there are these two sentences. Okay, uh, in fact, you can answer me in the chat boxes. That will be easier. I want you guys to tell me whether both these sentences are correct, whether one of them is correct, whether both are incorrect. All right. I want you to tell me whether both are incorrect, both are correct, one of them is incorrect. If one of them is incorrect, which one? Okay. So I'm looking at the chat because otherwise it will be a little difficult to follow through in the polls. So let's quickly, I want you to look at these two sentences and give me the verdict. Which of these statements is correct or incorrect? Or if both are correct or both are incorrect. They are simple sentences. Nishal says both correct. Both correct says Adonis. Sukhinder, both correct. Samshul says both correct. Ashish says both correct. Okay, I'm waiting for some more answers. All right, so far all of you are saying both are correct. Kritagya says both are fine. Shireen says both correct. Arup says both are correct. Arun says both are correct. Okay, I'm going to Shashank says. So all of you are of the opinion that both these statements are correct. Okay, so hold on to that thought, and here begins my I'm going to open my bag of magic tricks. Okay, now the two sentences. Okay, now these two sentences, if I look at these two sentences, let's just me bring the other screen. Yeah, these two sentences are talking about two events. Follow this closely, guys, otherwise you will remain confused. So there are two events in each of these sentences. The first sentence, sorry, researched and bankrupt. Okay, now when you look at these two let's say events or verbs, what you should do is you should ask yourself, did the two events take place at the same time? Okay, ask yourself, did the two take place at the same time? They took place, but did they take place at the same time? If they did not take place at the same time, then which one took place first? Okay, does the context tell me the sequence? All right, and if the context does not tell me the sequence, how do I clarify the sequence? Now, to go back to the first sentence, researched and bankrupt took place in the past. The first question, did the two take place at the same time? Now you guys answer me, did the two take place at the same time? Yes,
And I
did
have
the
a
two
poll
take
for
place
this.
at
You
the same
can
time?
respond in the poll
Yeah,
if you
I
want.
think we can have it. Did the two take place at the same time? No, quickly. Okay, if they did not take place at the same time, which one took place first? Does the context tell us which one took place first? Does the context tell us which one took place first? No. If the context does not tell us which one took place first, if the two events did not take place at the same time, then there is a need to clarify the sequence, and therefore this sentence is not correct. Okay, so for those of you who were saying this is correct, the research could have taken place before the company went bankrupt. It could have taken place after the company went bankrupt. I'm sure if you're an MBA student, there might be a case study where you're going to study a company after it went bankrupt. Okay, so the sentence does not tell me when the research took place. Okay, when did I research the company is not clear. All right, so the correct version would be, again, there could be two correct versions here. If I researched before the company went bankrupt, then I would say I had researched. I would use the past perfect for the older event. Okay, so I had researched about a company that went bankrupt in 2010. If I had researched, if I researched after the company went bankrupt, then I would use the past perfect with the bankrupt event. I researched about a company that had gone bankrupt in 2010. All right, okay, so the first sentence is incorrect, and the reason it is incorrect is the sequence was not clear about the two verbs that were there in the sentence, and that was the error. It was not clear which one took place first, and GMAT requires you to clarify the sequence. Okay, now let us look at the second sentence. I researched about a company that was incorporated in 2001. Now in this case, this sentence here is also talking about two events, researched and was incorporated. Okay, and I want you guys to ask yourselves again the same questions. Did these two things happen at the same time? Did I research about the company and was the company incorporated at the same time? You will, the logical answer will be no. How can I research something even before it is incorporated, or even when it is being incorporated. I can only research about a company after it is incorporated. Incorporated means it is set up. Okay, so here the context itself is telling me that research would have taken place after the incorporation, and therefore there is no need to use the past perfect. If I use the past perfect here, anywhere, okay, if I say I had researched about a company that was incorporated, that would be definitely illogical. I cannot research before the company is incorporated. And if I say I researched about a company that had been incorporated in 2001, that is unnecessary. Okay, that is unnecessary, guys. GMAT considers that incorrect. If you're using a past perfect where there is no need, then that is considered to be incorrect. So the second sentence here is correct. The first sentence is, the first sentence is incorrect. Okay, so was that a revelation or not, guys? I want each of you to understand, let this thing sink in. Okay, is that clear to you? I think a poll could be put up there for a yes and no.
Yeah, I've
Is
already
this clear to you? I saw that. Is this clear to you guys? Why the first sentence was correct, and why the second sentence, sorry, why the first sentence was incorrect, and why the second sentence was correct. Great. All of you have gotten onto that. All right, I'm getting some of you are not very clear, I think. Let me quickly run you through that. The first sentence is incorrect because it is not clear whether the research took place first or the company went bankrupt first. Okay, I could have researched about the company before it went bankrupt or after it went bankrupt. All right, because that clarity is not there, that is why I have to use the past perfect. So there are two correct versions depending on what was intended to be conveyed. All right, if I researched before the company went bankrupt, then I would say I had researched. If I researched after the company went bankrupt, I would say I researched about a company that had gone bankrupt. The second sentence is correct because the context tells me that the company was built in 2001. All right, so I could not have researched a company before it was built. So automatically the context tells me that my research took place in the past, but after the company was built. So I don't need to use any past perfect here. All right, in fact, using a past perfect in case 2 would be considered incorrect. That is what I was trying to tell you earlier, and that is something that's a very important learning when we are looking at the past perfect tenses. And this you will be able to identify only if you're looking at the meaning based approach. Okay, if you go via the meaning based approach, you will understand that, okay, logically speaking, sentence 2 is very clear about what happened when, and therefore I don't need to use any past perfect. So on that note, I'll bring up the question which is built on this along these lines. I want you to strictly use the meaning based approach as I showed you for that official question. Break the sentence, read it in parts, read it in pieces. Okay, understand the intended meaning, and then only go to eliminating the answer choices. So here's the question for you guys. All the best. You have about a couple of minutes to solve this one. So remember what you have just learned and put it into practice. All right. So I'll just count five quickly so that you can put in your polls. You're ready with it? Five, four, three, two, and one. I'm going to end the poll now. All right, guys. Did you find the question challenging? Just a yes and no. Just a yes or no in the chat, but no polls for this one. Just a quick feeling about, did you find the question challenging? Okay. Did you find the question challenging? Yes, great. Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, let's look at some of your so there are some mixed answers here. All right. Let me see. Now, each of you hold on to that thought, and I'm going to quickly go into the discussion part quickly. So, following our meaning based approach, I'm going to start analyzing the original sentence. Okay. More than 130,000 Arabs, so I'm talking about a certain number of Arabs, had immigrated to the United States. So I'm talking about the verb here is had immigrated to the US. When I read the past perfect here, had immigrated, what should go on in my mind, guys? Given the recent revelation about where to use past perfect, I should keep in mind that this past perfect is being used to clarify a sequence which is a clarification which will be needed. Okay, then only it will be correct. If there is no need and this had is being used here, it will be deemed as incorrect. So I'm just going to keep in mind that a past perfect has been used here. Okay, so clearly there should be another event in the same sentence, and there should be a need to use this past perfect vis-a-vis that past event. All right, and I'm going to look out for that. So these Arabs had immigrated to the United States as part of the Great Migration. All right. So this immigration took part as it was a part of the Great Migration. It seems to be an event here. And lived. So there is a connector here. And lived and worked here. So let me ask questions like who lived, who worked. Okay, the Arabs lived and the Arabs worked. So I have a subject verb here. So the and is connecting two clauses here. One, Arabs had immigrated to US. The other is Arabs lived and worked across the breadth of the United States. Now, if they lived and worked in the US, they could have done so only after immigrating, right? They could not have lived and worked in the US before they immigrated. Okay, so this is very clear that immigrated and lived and worked both took place in the past, but the context itself is telling me that first they must have immigrated and then only they must have lived and worked. So there is no need to use this had immigrated. Okay, there is no need. If I simply write the Arabs immigrated to the US and lived and worked across the US, it is very clear that they first immigrated and then they lived and worked. And this is where the error lies primarily. Okay, the use of the past perfect here is not correct. You don't need that. And a lot of you would have cottoned on to that. All right, so let's proceed with our understanding. So more than so many Arabs immigrated to the United States as a part of a great event, and they lived and worked across the breadth of the United States. Fine. Then we have a comma, and then we have fighting. Now again, is this fighting? It's a verb like word, but if we ask who fighting, then we don't get a proper logical answer. Okay, fighting without a helping verb is not a verb. So fighting here is a modifier. Again, as some of you might already know, it's an ing verbal modifier. All right, it is modifying. Now it could be modifying a noun, it could be modifying a verb. Ing modifiers can modify both. In this case, since it is preceded by a comma, okay, so the entire clause part from Arabs to United States is separated from this modifier by a comma, implies that fighting is modifying the immediately preceding verbs, and those are lived and worked. So while the Arabs lived and worked in the United States, what were they doing? We have been given more information about what were they doing while they lived and worked. So more information about the verb. Fighting its many wars, okay? And engaged. So and is therefore fighting and engaged, both are modifiers in this case. Now engaged is a ed modifier, ed verbal here. We know, again you will learn this if you don't already know, the ed modifiers can only modify nouns, okay? But here engaged along with fighting is modifying lived and worked. So engaged cannot modify the verb lived and worked. Ideally, therefore, we should have fighting its many wars and engaging in transformative debates. All right. Okay. So here, first thing to understand is therefore the context sets the understanding that immigrated took place first and then only lived and worked. Okay. And fighting and engaged are not parallel for two reasons. One, for the main reason is fighting is can modify lived and worked, but engaged, which is an ed verbal, it cannot modify lived and worked. So the correct version here would be engaging. All right. So the Arabs immigrated to the US as part of a great migration. They lived and worked across the breadth of the United States. While they lived and worked there, they fought many wars. Many of the its here refers to the United States. So they fought the wars of United States and they engaged in transformative debates that raged throughout this time period. All right. So that is the intended meaning of the sentence. And by spending ample time on this original sentence, you were able to identify this intended meaning. Now, when you go to the answer choices, it becomes very easy. So, choice A is incorrect. We have eliminated it. All right. As we have seen, there is no need of had immigrated here. Okay. All right. Let's look at choice B. Arabs immigrated to the United States. So, here we have rectified the had immigrated. But then they have put a had lived and worked across the breadth of the US afterwards. Now, they could not have lived and worked even before the immigration, right? Therefore, that makes this choice incorrect. All right. Also, fighting its many wars as part of the Great Migration is incorrect. So, as part of the Great Migration, all right, is a prepositional phrase, and it was modifying the verb immigrated. Okay, the first part, they had immigrated as part of the Great Migration. This choice says they were fighting the many wars as part of the Great Migration. So that is also incorrect, making this entire choice incorrect. I hope those of you who got this incorrect were able to understand where it went wrong. Okay. All right. Let's move to choice C. Arabs immigrated to the US and lived and worked across the breadth of the US. So far, so good. As part of the Great Migration. Now, as part of the Great Migration here is modifying the verbs lived and worked. If you look at the original sentence, they immigrated as part of the Great Migration. They did not live and work as part of the Great Migration, and therefore this choice is also incorrect. You can see how small nuances, okay, modifiers placed in the wrong places, all right, verbs used incorrectly, how the intended meaning helps you eliminate choices which would otherwise look correct. Let's look at choice D, the most popular choice of the evening. And so again, D is incorrect. So you can see how most of you who chose Arabs had immigrated did not see whether there was a necessity to use this had immigrated or not. And this is a very common error, guys. Okay. I'm sure after today, you're not going to make this error. I'm sure after today, the moment you see a past perfect, you will always look for the other event and see whether there is a need for the past perfect or not. Okay. So this is actually a great learning. All right. This choice is incorrect. Let's look at choice E. Arabs immigrated to the US as part of the Great Migration. Yes. Arabs lived and worked across the breadth of the US. Yes. Fighting its many wars and engaging. Yes. Correct on all counts. And that is how intended meaning really, I mean, using the meaning based approach really helps. So guys, a very quick poll now. Was that now those of you, I mean, I don't want to do a poll on this actually. We'll move to the next question. I hope those of you who found this question straightforward, okay, can now see where the challenge really lies. The challenge lies in your being able to understand the intended meaning. All right. Here, the intended meaning was clarified by the context. Immigration and took place before living and working, so there was no need to use that past perfect, and therefore that was the trap that was there. And almost nearly 60% of you fell in that trap. You chose choice D, almost very close to the original choice. Okay, guys. So what all this tells us therefore is that the most common confusion that arises around the past perfect tenses versus the simple past is that uh, where and why should we use the past perfect and not the simple past, and vice versa. Where and why should we use the present perfect tense and not the simple past, and vice versa. Okay, so in our free trial we have shared insights on these. We want you to go through them to understand the difference from the perspective of the meaning. There are more it gives a more detailed approach there. All right, so we want you to check out our trial version, the free trial version. Okay, all right. So as promised earlier, I'm going to take you to another question, and this time this one is on modifiers. So here comes the ed verbals, and we have just now seen one example, the engaged. So if that was not very clear to some of you, we'll seek more clarity here. All right, so the ed verbals are basically verb like words that end in either ed or en or eaten or t. You have words like worked, spoiled, drunken, and so on. Okay, they can be used as verbs, they can also be used as modifiers. So they look like verbs, they are actually modifiers that always modify a noun and nothing else. And this is what you've got to remember. As modifiers, ed verbals can only modify a noun and nothing else. All right. Let me bring up a question, okay, and let me bring up a poll. Right. I want you to read the simple sentence and tell me which of these words which are there in the poll are verbs. Okay. So here's the poll for you. Which of these words are verbs? Which of these words are verbs? Yes. Would some of you like to take some more time? Okay, done. Great. I think I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So all of you are agreed that the verb is, no, it's not all. Let me see. Okay, you're still posting. I'm so sorry. I think it reflected a little late on my side. All right. So another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll now. Okay, so the results are 8% of you believe that surrounded, lit, and is, all these three are verbs. Okay, all these three are action words, they are doing words. 16% of you believe surrounded and lit are verbs, which means you believe is not a verb. And 76% of you believe is the only verb. Okay, let's see. So here it goes. Now this is a very simple sentence, guys, but something that if you come across these kind of errors in very complicated sentences, sometimes you might not spot them. So it's necessary that you have a very clear idea about what is the verb and what is not the verb, what is the modifier and what is not the modifier. And in our course, we have simple tests designed to help you identify whether a word is a verb or a modifier. Okay, so for example, here the Taj Mahal surrounded by gardens. Now ask yourself, what surrounded or who surrounded? Okay, now did Taj Mahal do the surrounding? Did Taj Mahal surround something? No. Taj Mahal surrounded by gardens is a description of the Taj Mahal. So here this surrounded is not a verb. Surrounded is a modifier. It is modifying the noun Taj Mahal to next to which it is placed. Okay, So Taj Mahal surrounded by gardens and lit by moonlight. Again, if you ask the question, who lit? The answer won't be that Taj Mahal lit something. Taj Mahal did not light up something. Okay. Taj Mahal itself was lit by moonlight. So surrounded and lit. Surrounded by gardens is a description of Taj Mahal. Lit by moonlight is a description of Taj Mahal. So the Taj Mahal, what is the verb for this subject? Is a sight to behold. That's my main sentence. The Taj Mahal is a sight to behold. So only is the verb. And additional information about this Taj Mahal is given by the ed verb is surrounded and lit. Okay. So again, just a thought here that if this kind of sentence or this kind of let's say if I change the sentence a bit, the Taj Mahal surrounded by gardens and lit by moonlight, a sight to behold. All right, there wouldn't be any verb in the entire sentence. Okay. So what I will do is, here is a full length question for you. All right. The question is based on the concept of where to use the ed verbals and where not to use them. So and this is not an easy question, guys. If you use the meaning based approach, I'm sure you're going to get it correct. All right. So stick to the meaning based approach, guys. Trust me on this. All right. Resist the temptation to use any other approach. So all the best. Let me leave you in peace. All right. I'll just count up to 5. I mean, I'll do a 5 count. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're going to end the poll now. Okay. All right. So let me quickly. So let's see. 5% of you believe choice A, that is the original choice, is correct as is. 11% of you believe choice B is correct. 61% of you believe choice C is correct. None of you have gone for choice D, and 22% of you believe choice E is correct. So let's see. I'm sure, given the varied choices here, I'm sure a lot of you found this question challenging. Some might even have found it simple. So stay with that thought and let's see whether you were right in your thinking. So here's our analysis. Okay. Based on toxicity and exposure risks. So here, based is an ed verbal very clearly because we don't have a subject for based. All right. So the next thing that you need to look out for is a noun should follow this based. All right. So based on toxicity and exposure risks, pesticides, toxic substances, and contaminants. Well, pesticides, toxic substances, and contaminants are nouns. Okay. But what does it mean if we say based on toxicity, pesticides? So are the pesticides based on toxicity and exposure risks? Are the toxic substances based on toxicity? Are the contaminants based on toxicity? So the ed verbal based on toxicity and exposure risks, it modifies the nouns uh, here. It modifies the nouns that follow it. All right. Okay. So that itself doesn't make sense. It conveys a very illogical meaning that the pesticides themselves were based on poison or the pesticides were based on exposure risk. Let's see what we are trying to say. So based on toxicity and exposure risk, pesticides etc were either banned or restricted by the EPA. So most likely what we are trying to say is that these pesticides etc were banned because they were toxic and because of the exposure risks. All right. So now I'm sure most of you would be thinking that what is the problem in saying that pesticides etc can be banned based on toxicity. Okay. Let us understand what's wrong with it. When we say pesticides etc were banned based on toxicity, we are trying to modify the action of banning. Okay. And not the noun entity pesticide etc. So when you say pesticides etc were banned based on toxicity, you are actually modifying the verb banned, and we know that we cannot. Can we use ed verbals to modify action? No, we cannot, right? We cannot use ed verbals to modify actions, and that is why uh, uh, based is not going to modify the verbs. It is modifying the nouns, but they don't make sense with the nouns. All right. So the idea here that was that these pesticides etc were banned. Okay. Because they were found to be toxic and because they were found to have exposure risks. All right. So they were banned because of certain things. All right. They were not banned based on toxicity. Let's read further. Were either banned or restricted by the EPA, which led to a significant decrease. All right. So now here the verb which is referring to what? Okay. Which is referring to what? We'll come back to this. Okay. Let's just look at the correct version which I've put up here. We are probably trying to say that on the basis of toxicity and exposure risks, pesticides etc were banned, or we can also say that pesticides etc were banned by the EPA on the basis of toxicity. All right. So this is the ideal version. The next thing is which led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution levels in the city. Now, this which we know is a relative pronoun, okay, and it can modify the noun which is usually placed next to it. So, which here is referring to the EPA, okay. So, are we saying that the EPA led to a significant decrease in air pollution, air and water pollution? Okay, right? That makes no sense, right? So, therefore, which is illogically modifying EPA. What we want to say is that the action of banning or restriction led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution. All right. That is what we are trying to say. Therefore, the which has to be replaced, or the sentence has to be restructured. Okay. The sentence needs to be restructured so as to show that it was the action of banning and restriction which led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution. So if we now put together the intended meaning, what we are trying to say is pesticides, toxic substances, and contaminants were either banned or restricted by the EPA. Okay. And this ban or restriction was placed on the basis of toxicity and exposure risks of the said substances. The ban or restriction led to the decrease in the air and water pollution levels. This is the intended meaning, and our correct choice should reflect this intended meaning, or otherwise it is incorrect. So see the amount of time that we give to this. All right, you might be wondering, this is very time consuming, but trust me, this is a skill that you build, and once you have built the skill, you won't even think twice. You will do it intuitively. But while you're learning it, it will take some time to inculcate this. But this is like a foolproof method. Anyway, so let's now move to the elimination of the answer choices. Based on toxicity, we've already eliminated this choice, and any other choice which starts with based on toxicity and exposure risks and that modifies pesticides would be eliminated. Let's look at choice B. Again, the same thing here, based on toxicity and exposure risk. That is one error. Okay, that is definitely one error. Let's look at apart from that, pesticides were either banned or restricted by the EPA, leading to. Here, leading to, okay, leading is modifying EPA. Leading is an ing verbal, and without a comma separating it, as we saw in the case of that Arabs question, it modifies the nearest noun. So here, EPA leading to a significant decrease in air and water pollution levels makes no sense. Therefore, this choice is also incorrect. Now, what I want each of you to notice is whether you got the choice correct for the right reasons, whether you eliminated it for the right reasons. Okay. Choice C. So choice C corrects the original error, that is based on toxicity. It says on the basis of toxicity and exposure risk, and on the basis of toxicity is modifying banned or restricted. We know that a verb modifier can be placed slightly away from the verb also. So on the basis of toxicity, sorry guys, on the basis of toxicity and exposure risks, pesticides were either banned or restricted by the EPA. Then we have a comma. Leading here therefore modifies the verb banned or restricted. Okay, because of that comma separating the ing verbal from the preceding clause. So the banning or the restriction led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution, and therefore choice C is correct. Most of you chose choice C, so I'm happy about that. What I would want you to see is whether you chose it for the right reasons. Let's look at choice D. Although nobody chose it, so I'm not going to discuss much about this. The way this sentence is framed, it implies that pesticides were banned or restricted by the EPA, and pesticides led to a decrease in air and water pollution. That is very illogical. Let's move to choice E. 22% of you chose this. So let me show you. Apart from the original error based on toxicity, okay, look at the rest of it. Pesticides, toxic substances, and contaminants which were either banned or restricted by the EPA. So now if I remove this relative pronoun clause, which were either banned, what remains behind is pesticides, etc., led to decrease in air and water pollution, which is illogical. Okay, and therefore choice E is incorrect. So for those of you who mark choice E, you must read the entire sentence with equal focus, guys. Sometimes we give more focus when we start reading a sentence, but by the time we are halfway through to the sentence, our attention lapses and we kind of let down our guard, and we do not notice the errors which we would have otherwise noticed. Okay, so here by the time in this choice, when you come to led to, you must ask yourself, led is a verb, so what is the subject here? What led to? And the answer that you would get would be the pesticides led to a significant decrease in air and water pollution, and then you would know it is illogical. So this is also a very important learning, and this is something that I've noticed in so many of my students. Okay, in my sessions with them, I have seen, and they have also admitted that while they start with very strong attention when they start reading a sentence, if the sentence is very long, they sometimes lose track of what they have read, and that is because they are often not following the meaning based approach. Once they start following that meaning based approach, then their attention span is equally divided over all the parts of the sentence, and they're able to notice the errors. So that brings us to the end of this question. All right. And now by now I'm sure you're able to see how easy it is to correct the errors by focusing on the meaning of the sentence. Okay. Answering these kind of questions is the key to cross that V35 mark. These are the level of questions. These are the type of errors that you need to notice if you want to cross that V35 mark and get higher scores. So what is required? Just let me move on from this. I'll just quickly, because we are running a little short on time, guys, I'm going to hand over to Piyush. But before that, I would just quickly like to recap the things that you would need when you are following this meaning-based approach, guys. Okay, what you would need is to pause and read. Okay, very, very, very important to understand the meaning. As you have seen me do it, pause and read. Focus on the role played by each entity. You've seen me do it. Okay. All right, and for doing this we have dedicated units that help you learn the basic components of a sentence. All right, that help you identify the subject verb pair, that help you differentiate between verbs and verbals. We teach you where to pause, and once you have learned these skills, we focus on the framework driven approach. Okay, we provide you with very simple frameworks to be able to identify errors related to the subject verb pair, to the noun pronoun pair, to the modifier modified entity pair. We have frameworks for identifying errors in lists, which is very important in identifying parallelism errors or comparison errors. Okay, so all this leads to a very important understanding, and that is that students who don't cover up gaps in understanding of concepts right away, okay, right at the beginning, they struggle later. You might feel that you have covered the concepts and you move towards the solving questions quickly, and then you see you're not being able to solve the questions correctly, and you start wondering what happened. I have gone through the concepts, and why am I still making errors? Okay, you're still making errors because you often ignore the gaps that are left even after going through the concepts. You proceed to the advanced concepts and you solve questions, and then all hell breaks loose. Okay, what you have done in the process is you've lost time. So what GMATwhiz course offers you is improvement modules in real time, and Piyush will talk to you about this in detail. If you do not if you're not doing well on some concepts, we provide you with real time improvement. Okay, we point out where you're going wrong, what are the concepts that you need to look at right away, and then we redirect you there. So that makes this the most effective way to learn. Okay, such real-time intervention is really very effective. It saves you a lot of time. It saves you from that despair that you feel when you keep making errors even after going through the concepts. So I'll hand over the reins to Piyush now. Piyush, I think we'll
Sh- Sure,